Check out the moves of this maniac. Here's a look at the new Kotobukiya, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre horror Bishoujo statue of Leatherface chainsaw dance. Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre joins the horror Bishoujo lineup with the infamous chainsaw dance scene used as a motif. The sculpt of the large chainsaw Leatherface can be seen swinging around, uses the same sculpt data that was used in the previously released Leatherface Bishoujo statue. The original bloody chainsaw design has been analyzed and faithfully reproduced as the one shown in the film. The statue also follows the minute settings of the film, such as the damage that can be seen on the outfit. The mask face part is included with the statue, further enhancing her madness and eeriness. This statue comes with a base that exemplifies the vast Texas roads, covered in the large tire tracks, reminding fans of the climax of the film. While Leatherface goes looking for a dance partner, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the Bishoujo statue of Chainsaw Dance Leatherface stands. Instead of actually going to the top of her head here, obviously the top of the chainsaw is the highest point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the tape measure right there. According to the readout, Chainsaw Dance Leatherface is 9.8 inches in height. Switching that over to centimeters quickly, the statue stands 23.8, a little over 23.5 centimeters tall. Seeing as this also marks the second Leatherface release that we've gotten from Kotobukiya, obviously we're going to do some comparisons and bring in the original one that we looked at not too long ago. Definitely a different pose, definitely a different base, definitely different costumes, but it still keeps the same style of mold to the head sculpt. We'll do some closer looks at those in a second. Now, that original Leatherface Bishoujo statue we had a look at came included with a swappable head sculpt, and the Chainsaw Dance version of Leatherface continues that trend, though the mask that they include with this one is very different than the one that we got with the earlier release. Let's go ahead and pick that up right now so you guys can get a closer look at this. This depicts the pretty lady paint scheme to the mask that is different from the one that we got before. Let's just bring in the original mask. You can see the difference between the two. Now, I've always been a big fan of the pretty lady paint scheme to the mask, and it does change, of course, the different expression that's underneath the face. I will say, though, I do like the fact that the eyes seem a little bit more sunken in on the pretty lady head sculpt versus this one right here, which was almost on the same level as the mask. And like I said, the expression is very different as well. If you're curious, though, no, you can't sadly swap the heads. So if you want to use like this head sculpt, for example, in the original Bishoujo Leatherface, you just can't pull it off. The pegs are about the same size, but you can see that this one has a longer, well, it's longer on the one side. So it's a shorter peg. They almost could have just used the same shaped peg. It would have made some sense, and then you could just swap this around. But I guess they wanted to make it unique to this head sculpt, unique to this statue. So you wouldn't be able to swap one for the other. I'll show you guys how to swap that head sculpt out in a second, but first certainly wanted to show you guys the display base that a running Leatherface stands on top of. It's supposed to, I suppose, mimic the idea that Leatherface is running like you see at the end of the movie. It sort of has a weird pose to it, and it's leaning off on an angle. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I will say, though, to the credit of the display base, it has some really nice terrain sculpted in there. It certainly also helps that they've added the darker coloring of the black to really accent those tire treads sunken into the mud of the Texas land. The interesting thing about the base, though, is while you're looking at this, you would just assume that it's this color right here that they've molded in the plastic, this kind of muddier beige. Quite the contrary, though, is you flip the statue upside down, and it's actually instead white plastic. I found that was really strange. I really wasn't expecting that, because I just assumed, if anything, that they probably would have used this coloring right here. And I don't think they would have gone in and painted this white. They probably instead gone the more extra longer mile of just painting in all the white plastic with, like I said, this muddier terrain and the grass on the side. Wouldn't it just have been easier just to sculpt the base in this color and then just added the additional washing of the black and then the green for the grass on the side? I don't know. It's just some strange thing that I noticed when I took the statue out of the packaging. Okay, so I really want to talk about the way that they've posed this statue. When you're looking at it like this, the statue has almost like a leaning forward look to it. It's not until you spin it to the side that you see that they've sculpted Leatherface, which what I'm guessing to be in a running pose. Successful in some ways because you've got that back leg bent back, and then you've got the main leg running straight. But it does result in the statue sort of leaning, teetering forward. I probably would have straightened up that statue just a little bit more. I get the effect that they were trying to go with. They wanted to have a little bit of movement, energy in this statue. But the result of it, though, is it does kind of have Leatherface looking like, well, like she's leaning forward, almost as if she's going to fall off the display stand altogether. Looking at the default head sculpt for Chainsaw Dance Leatherface, her head's up here, by the way. Yeah, okay. It is a pretty looking head portrait, I will say. And you know, of the two Leatherfaces that we've gotten from Kotobukiya so far, and I say so far because I hope that's not the end of them, I will say this is my favorite of the two. Slide this one over so you can see the difference between the two. We'll bring in the original Leatherface. I could certainly imagine that it's the same character. It's got the same head shape, same nose shape, eyes, and certainly the mouth. But I don't know. I find like the Chainsaw Dance Leatherface has more makeup maybe applied to the face. There's definitely a lot more red, and there's a lot more reflection on the lips, for example, that I just find it is a prettier looking portrait of the two. Some would say it's blasphemy, the fact that we're looking at Leatherface like this, and at least I would say that they've covered off the tracks of having Leatherface with his two distinct looks from the film. And again, we'll just move this one off for the time being. We'll probably bring that one in back so I can swap out the masks so you can see the difference between the two masks. Like again, if you are a purist to Leatherface and would prefer to have it with a skin mask, then by all means, you can remove this head completely. Although this one is a little bit more difficult than the original Leatherface that we looked at before, simply just because the head is contained inside the arms. It doesn't give you much leeway, and especially when you've got this charm so dangerously close to the sculpting of the hair, you will want to tread cautiously when it comes to removing the head sculpt, because you just don't want to clip the side of that charm bracelet and break it right off. But like I said, though, I think this is the prettier of the two. The little bit of red that they've added to the cheeks, as well as I find like the eyes are a lot prettier on this one than the original Leatherface. I just think it is a nice looking figure, a nicer looking face sculpt at least. But again, if you guys are certainly ones that would like to have Leatherface displayed with the mask, well, all you have to do is just, like I said, tread carefully, cautiously, remove the head, and then just pull it forward. You kind of have to kind of tuck it in there to get it onto the socket of the neck. And then, again, you're just going to do the exact same thing with the mask, fitting it over top of the peg and sliding it down like that. I don't know. It's just me, I'm sure. But of the two, I would be more inclined to display the Leatherfaces. In fact, the other Leatherface, I never put the other mask head sculpt on. I just like this one a lot more. But you can see the fact that they at least grace you with two different head portraits depending on your personal preference for the figure or the character. Why don't we actually put this one down here for a second? We'll bring in the original Leatherface. And I'm going to go ahead and swap this one off. Just pop the head off the neck. And again, you can't use the same necks, the same heads, simply because the socket, the hole on the underside of the neck is a different shape. One's a little bit longer than the other. And we'll just fit this one down. Actually, this one goes a certain way that you have to, there we go, just line that up on top of the peg and fit that down like that. And there's the two Leatherfaces with their masks on. I find it's a little unsettling, really, to display these types of Leatherfaces, especially the fact that what they're wearing. I mean, we can talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I think for me, when it comes to displaying these characters, Leatherface, I find, granted, yes, in the film, he's going to look a little bit more gruesome. But if you're going to be putting him in the scope of what you would expect from a horror Bishoujo line, again, I'd probably be more inclined to display them with the female head sculpts rather than the masks. I appreciate the fact that they include the swappable head sculpt. So if you are, again, a purist and would like to have your Leatherface displayed with his skin mask, because that's what Leatherface is known to have, then at least they give you that option available and you can swap them out if you want instead. Looking at the rest of the statue, it's a little bit more jarring, of course, to keep the pretty lady head portrait on in place and then start looking at all the other things that they've sculpted onto the statue. To say busting at the seams, I think, is a bit of an understatement. Busting both the seams, the buttons, and anything that's trying to hold this body down. You can see so much the force that it's blown the tie off to the side. Subtlety, I don't think, works well specifically with this particular statue. Treading cautiously, Kotobukiya has been in the past with horror Bishoujo statues, mixing femininity along with male masculine characters from slasher films. Like I said, I feel like the Leatherfaces, the two that we've looked at, the one before and now this one, This one doesn't leave, like I said, very little hidden here. Some would say that that's a bit of a turnoff, certainly when it comes to a statue of Leatherface. And again, if you're a collector of the horror Bishoujos, this is sort of what you would expect, but I would say even then, it doesn't leave much to the way of imagination. It does have some nice coloring, I will say, to its credit. Especially like the top, where it's got a lighter color of that white, and then they've airbrushed a darker color of that yellow around it. Oh boy. Spinning it around, you can certainly see it from the back. I like the way that they've sculpted the jacket up like this. It adds a little bit of energy, and you could imagine then that the character is running along, and we'll talk a little more about that in a second. It does have some noted scarring. It's got one rip across the leg area here with some visible blood. I find that with a lot of the Bishoujo's line, they really pull back the amount of blood because they really want to keep their characters female and very attractive to look at. So really, when it comes to like wounds and stuff, you don't see a whole lot of them. It's got a little bit on the leg, and then it's got one notable tear on the back, which looks to be some visible underwear underneath the pants. What will be blood, of course, when we look up, way up, is of course the chainsaw that she's wielding in her hands. The previous Leatherface, mind you, had the chainsaw closer down by her hip. This chainsaw-wielding maniac, though, likes to prefer to have the chainsaw right above her head. I guess one thing they could have incorporated was a little bit of drops of blood, maybe around the area of the hair or the shoulders, where you would imagine, of course, if he's or she is spinning the chainsaw around, you would imagine then blood would probably be settling around here, and maybe around here as well. The chainsaw blade has definitely been used, covered and saturated in blood. Again, like the original one that we looked at, it does have that little few drips of blood. That's been sculpted on top of it, and that looks really nice. I like the way they've done that. Excessive amounts of blood, of course, caked all over the actual main chainsaw, and they've even painted in areas that you would expect to have blood on it, like, for example, the handles that she's holding in her hand. One last observation I want to make about the horror Bishoujo Leatherfaces, now having looked at both of these, is that I find Kotobukiya have picked pretty good poses in both cases. The original one I was a little on the fence with this specific pose. Not really sure what was happening here, but I kind of read it more like Leatherface is being scolded for something she had done wrong. The arm is kind of up, kind of bracing her face, and then the chainsaw behind her, like I said, like she's just done something wrong. Quite the contrary, though, when we're looking at the chainsaw dance version. Though frustrated that its victim got away, this chainsaw-wielding maniac at least is wielding the chainsaw above her head. And you can see, of course, she's in more of a running pose. Both the statues do sort of have a leaning stance to them. They're not an upright statue like perhaps some of the other horror Bishoujos that we've looked at before. But you know, both of them really work well, and they work well together. Again, when you're looking at them side to side, not only are you getting Leatherface from two different parts of the original classic film, but you're also getting two different looks that he has in the movie as well. One clever thing that Kotobukiya did with both their releases of the horror Bishoujo Leatherface was to include the statues with swappable head sculpts, featuring that iconic, classic skin mask. Because after all, that could have been a deal breaker why some collectors would have just passed on the statue altogether because claiming it didn't look nearly enough like Leatherface. Maybe that was one of the issues that plagued the horror Bishoujo Michael Myers. Sure, she was wearing the coveralls, but her mask was nowhere to be found. Well, it was, but it served as more just a flat prop piece that sat on the display stand. Had they maybe gone the same route as they did with Leatherface, where Michael Myers could have had a swappable head, you could have popped the head off and replaced it with one that had a mask, you never know, could have worked out to be a better looking horror Bishoujo. Granted, that being the case, in either case, I'm not going to be displaying them with masks on their face anyways, because I find it hides too pretty of a portrait. I like these head sculpts a lot more, and even though it doesn't have as much that familiar face or mask that Leatherface is known for having, I much prefer instead to display my horror Bishoujos as pretty as I possibly can. And this horror Bishoujo of Leatherface, in a dancing chainsaw pose, is definitely the prettier of the two. I'm still happy that I picked up that original one, but of the two, I think this is my favorite by far. Now, this could be completely something that's going to serve to be a turnoff to some horror collectors out there that don't really want to have their Leatherface to be sexy and standing like this. You either like horror Bishoujos or you don't. I like horror Bishoujos, but I will admit, this one doesn't leave as much to the imagination as maybe some of the other horror Bishoujos we've looked at before. Ironically enough, the ones that seem to show the most skin have been in both cases Leatherface, and I find that somewhat ironic because half the time he's wearing other people's skin anyways. The only thing I will say that I'm not as big of a fan on when it comes to this statue, I like the pose, but I find like the statue itself leans too far forward. I mean, I get what they were trying to go with. It sort of is supposed to look like Leatherface is chasing the girl with the chainsaw above her head. But the end result is kind of looks like from certain angles, especially when you look at it from the side, it kind of looks like the statue's going to fall off the display stand. Other than that, though, like I said, this is my favorite of the two. Let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think. What's your favorite of the two Leatherfaces that we've had a look at? Whether you guys are collecting the horror Bishoujo statues for yourself, and perhaps for a video question, what other horror character, primarily considered as a male, would you like to see presented as a female horror Bishoujo statue? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you guys are also new to this channel and enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit this channel with a like, hit this video with a like, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, and make sure you turn on the bell notification to give YouTube those friendly reminders that yes, you want to be notified every single time a new video on this channel pops up. And of course, keep your peepers peeled because there's always going to be new content coming your way. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.